Formula One drivers are furious. Penalties have reportedly changed the finishing order, and race results that looked final are no longer final at all. Two reports appeared on consecutive days, both pointing toward the same explosive controversy. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile has issued decisions serious enough to overturn results, reshape the classification, and leave drivers questioning where racing ends and punishment begins. But here is the part that changes everything. The source confirms the controversy, yet it does not reveal which drivers were penalized, which race result was altered, or the exact reason behind the decisions. That missing information creates an even bigger question. Was this a clear enforcement of the rules, or did Formula One just witness another decision capable of changing a championship after the cars had already crossed the line? Because when penalties rewrite a race, they do more than move names on a result sheet. They change points, reputations, team strategies, and possibly the future of the title fight. And the most important detail is not simply who lost a position. It is why the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile believed the original result could no longer stand. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this controversy matters, you have to look beyond the final classification. A Formula One race does not always end when the checkered flag falls. The cars stop. The drivers climb out. The celebrations begin. But behind closed doors, another contest can still be unfolding. Officials review incidents, submit evidence. Drivers are questioned. And one decision can move a car forward, push another backward, or completely change what millions of people believed they had just watched. That is where the anger begins. Because a driver can spend an entire race managing tires, defending position, attacking at the limit, and surviving pressure that lasts for more than an hour. Then, after the finish, the result can change without a single wheel turning. The source confirms that penalties were issued and that race results were overturned. It also points to reports published on 2 consecutive days. But it does not identify the drivers involved, the race in question, the exact penalties, or the official reasoning behind them. That missing detail matters. It means the controversy is real in the source, but the full case is not yet explained. And without that explanation, every possible interpretation becomes more explosive. Was a driver punished for gaining an advantage? Was there contact? Was there a technical issue? Was a team found to have broken a rule after the race? Or did the officials reconsider an incident that had already appeared settled? The source does not say. But here is what makes these situations so difficult. Formula One rules are written to create order in a sport built on chaos. Cars are separated by tiny margins. Drivers make decisions in fractions of a second, and officials are expected to judge those moments with absolute consistency. That sounds reasonable. Tasked. But consistency is exactly where the pressure becomes unbearable. One driver can believe he raced hard but fairly. Another can believe he was forced off the track. A team can argue that no lasting advantage was gained. The officials can look at the same incident and reach a completely different conclusion. And once a penalty changes the result, the argument is no longer only about the rule. It becomes personal. Imagine winning a race at school, crossing the line first, and being handed the trophy. Then, much later, someone tells you the result has changed because of something that happened halfway through. Even when the decision is correct, the emotion does not disappear. You still remember crossing the line. You still remember believing the result was yours. Now imagine that the result affects championship points, contracts, team bonuses, and your reputation in front of the entire world. That is the pressure Formula One drivers face. And this is why post-race penalties create a different kind of fury. A driver can accept losing on the track. It is much harder to accept losing in a document. But that is only the first layer. The bigger issue is what happens to trust. Drivers need to know where the limit is. They need to understand what will be punished, what will be allowed, and whether the same action will receive the same response at the next race. Without that trust, every battle becomes uncertain. Do you attack? Do you back out? Do you risk a penalty? Do you surrender a position because the rules may be interpreted differently later? These are not small questions. They affect the way drivers race. And when drivers begin racing the officials instead of each other, Formula One changes. The most dramatic part is that penalties do not only punish the past, they influence the future. A driver who receives a severe decision may become more cautious in the next battle. Another may believe the officials are allowing more aggression and push even harder. Teams may warn their drivers to avoid certain moves. Others may decide the risk is worth taking. One controversial ruling can shape the behavior of the entire grid. And that is why an overturned result is never just an administrative correction. It sends a message. The problem is that the message has to be clear. If the decision is poorly explained, or if fans cannot understand why it happened, frustration spreads quickly. Drivers feel targeted. Teams feel confused. Supporters begin comparing one incident with another. And suddenly, the discussion is no longer about the race. It is about whether the rules are being applied fairly. That is the dangerous point. Because Formula One depends on people believing that the competition is genuine. The fastest car should not always win. Strategy matters. Mistakes matter. Weather matters. Pressure matters. But everyone must believe that the same rulebook applies to every driver. Once that belief is damaged, every penalty becomes suspicious. Every decision becomes political. Every overturned result feels like something has been taken away. And this latest controversy appears to have touched exactly that nerve. The source headline says, "Drivers were furious." Not disappointed. Not confused. Furious. That choice of language suggests the reaction was emotional, immediate, and serious. But because the source does not provide direct quotes, names, or official documents, the exact nature of that anger remains unspecified. And that creates the central mystery. Were the drivers angry because the penalties were too harsh? Were they angry because the decisions came too late? Or were they angry because similar incidents had been judged differently before? Those are three completely different problems. One questions severity. One questions process. And one questions fairness. The final answer changes how the entire situation should be understood. But before reaching that answer, there is another issue that cannot be ignored. The timing. The reports were published on consecutive days. That suggests the story did not end with one announcement. Something continued. More information may have emerged. A second decision may have followed. The reaction may have grown, or the consequences may have become clearer after the first result changed. The source does not reveal which of those possibilities is correct, but it does reveal one important thing. This was not a moment that disappeared immediately. It developed, and when a Formula One controversy keeps developing after the race, the pressure usually moves from the drivers to the teams, then from the teams to the officials. That is where the conflict becomes much bigger than one penalty. i.e., because now the question is not only whether the original decision was correct, the question is whether the sport can explain that decision in a way the drivers, teams, and fans can all accept. And the next part of this story is where that trust begins to break. And this is where the conflict moves beyond one ruling. Because the moment a race result is overturned, every driver on the grid starts asking the same question. Could this happen to me next? That fear changes behavior. A driver who once trusted his instincts may hesitate before making a move. A team may tell its driver to avoid a battle that looks too risky. Another team may study the same situation and decide the officials have opened the door to a more aggressive interpretation. Now the grid is no longer working from one clear standard. It is working from fear, guesswork, and memory. That is a dangerous combination. Formula One drivers operate at speeds where hesitation can be more costly than aggression. They cannot pause in the middle of a corner and consult the rulebook. They have to decide immediately. Attack the gap. Leave the space. Hold the position. give the place back. Every choice happens before the driver can know how the officials will interpret it later. And that is why consistency matters more than almost anything else. A harsh rule can still be accepted if everyone understands it. A confusing rule cannot. Think of a referee changing the meaning of a foul halfway through a match. The players would not only become angry, they would stop knowing how to compete. That is the deeper danger here. The source tells us that drivers were furious and that penalties overturned race results, but it does not provide the names, the incidents, the final classification changes, or the official explanation. So the exact controversy remains hidden. But the emotional consequence is clear. Drivers believed something had crossed a line. Maybe they believed the punishment was too severe. Maybe they believed the decision came too late. Maybe they believed the standard had changed after the race was already finished. And each possibility creates a different kind of anger. A severe penalty feels brutal. A delayed penalty feels destabilizing. An inconsistent penalty feels unfair. But when those feelings combine, the damage becomes much larger than one result. It becomes a problem of confidence. Not confidence in the car. Confidence in the system. That distinction matters. Drivers accept that racing is unpredictable. Engines fail, tires lose grip, weather changes, strategies collapse. Those risks belong to the sport. But an unclear decision feels different. It feels like control has moved away from the track. A driver can prepare for rain. He can manage tire wear. He can study an opponent. But he cannot prepare for a rule that appears to move after the incident has already happened. And this changes everything. Because once drivers begin to believe that the same action could produce different punishments, the championship becomes harder to read. Not because the cars are unpredictable, because the consequences are. A position gained today could be removed later. A defensive move accepted in one race could be punished in another. A celebration could begin before the result is truly secure. And that creates a strange reality. The checkered flag no longer feels final. The podium no longer feels final. The points no longer feel final. The race can end, but the result may still be moving. That is not only frustrating for drivers. It affects teams, engineers, sponsors, and fans. A team may build its strategy around a result that later disappears. An engineer may believe a setup delivered valuable points, only to see the classification rewritten. A sponsor may celebrate a podium that is removed after the ceremony. Fans may leave the circuit believing one driver won, then discover hours later that the official order has changed. Even when the rules are correctly applied, the emotional experience becomes fractured. People remember what they saw. The documents tell them something else. And that tension is difficult to repair, but here is what most people miss. The anger may not be focused only on the penalty itself. It may be focused on the process. Drivers want to know when an incident will be investigated. They want to understand what evidence matters. They want to know whether intent matters, whether outcome matters, and whether the same standards apply to every car. Without that clarity, every explanation feels incomplete. And when explanations feel incomplete, suspicion grows. That does not mean the officials acted incorrectly. The source does not give enough evidence to reach that conclusion, but it does show that the reaction was strong enough to become the central story. That tells us something important. The dispute was not seen as a minor technical correction. It was seen as a decision with real consequences. And those consequences may reach far beyond the race result. Championship points can decide contracts. They can influence team orders. They can change development priorities. They can alter the way drivers approach the next event. A single penalty can create pressure that lasts for months. Imagine a driver losing points after the race. At the next event, he may feel forced to take greater risks to recover them. That extra aggression creates more incidents. More incidents create more investigations. And more investigations create even more frustration. One decision can start a chain reaction.